It began like any other off day in a season that already felt bigger than the sport until the air in the room shifted. The cameras quieted, conversations died, and a hush ran across the faces of people who live for shocking moments. Michael Jordan stepped through the door with the gravity of a moon landing, and even the walls seemed to lean in to listen. Beside him walked Lexie Hull, chin lifted, eyes steady, carrying a secret that could set an entire league on fire. Caitlin Clark turned toward them, not knowing she was 3 heartbeats away from a deal that would rewrite the rules of women's sports. What followed was an announcement. It was a coronation disguised as business. Jordan didn't have to say much, because greatness rarely needs a microphone to be heard. Lexie's smile gave the ending away before the story even started. Her presence a bridge between history and the future. And then the words landed. A Nike offer so seismic it rattled the old ceiling off its bolts. $52 million. 8 years, a signature line designed for the way she moves. Cameras clicked, but for a second the frame froze on Clark's face, where disbelief melted into gratitude, and gratitude hardened into resolve. The room absorbed the moment, like a cathedral receiving light through stained glass. People exhaled, and the sound felt like waves rolling off a cliff after the storm breaks. A shoe box appeared, matte black, the initials embossed like a seal from another kingdom. Proof that this wasn't rumor, it was reality. Fingers trembled, lids lifted, and the future stared back as stitched leather and thoughtful curves meant for fastest release in college basketball history. The shock didn't roar. It hummed, the low, unshakable pitch of beginning that knows it will be remembered. No one had to explain what this meant, because the math was visible in every widened eye. This was what it looks like when destiny stops knocking and kicks the door in. Nike wasn't just making an investment. It was making a statement. And sometimes statements move markets faster than numbers can catch them. Jordan's presence turned the pen into a sword, and Lexie's nod made it clear this was a cameo. It was coalition. When Clark reached for the shoe, the room felt the baton pass, and the race changed speed. From that instant forward, the narrative was no longer about potential. It was about inevitable impact. The most scrutinized rookie in America now carried a brand as confidently as she carries a double team. The deal was an accessory to her career. It was infrastructure, steel and glass and electricity, for a skyline that hadn't existed the day before. People who didn't watch women's basketball started asking questions, and questions are the first currency of a cultural wave. Caitlin didn't just receive a contract. She received a mandate to change the temperature of an entire sport. Long before the world learned the number on the contract, the world learned the number on the scoreboard. Clark didn't climb the NCAA scoring mountain. She exploded into a confetti of records that fluttered across state lines. She turned arenas into pilgrimage sites where people showed up 2 hours early to watch warm-ups, as if they were opening acts. Every step back three felt like a postcard from the future, stamped, signed, and mailed to anyone still holding on to yesterday. What she did at Iowa wasn't a season. It was an era squeezed into a calendar year. Her popularity didn't grow. It detonated, sending rating spikes through networks like lightning through copper. Broadcasters ran out of adjectives, then started inventing new ones, because the old dictionary couldn't keep up with the new physics. Opponents planned for her, and then watched those plans evaporate 5 possessions into the first quarter. Kids copied her footwork in driveways under porch lights, trying to build a little bit of her audacity into their own bones. Coaches whispered that she changed scouting. Marketers shouted that she changed scale. When she shattered the all-time NCAA scoring record in March 2024, applause didn't feel like enough. So the moment simply grew larger than sound. ESPN built a frame around her, but the frame could barely hold the portrait. Her highlights didn't trend. They colonized the feed, staking a flag on everyone's attention span, whether they followed basketball or not. You can't fake gravity, and Clark's game bet more of it every month. By the end, the question wasn't, is she ready for pros? It was, are the pros ready for what follows her? Draft night didn't feel like a selection. It felt like a coronation with better lighting. The Indiana Fever called her name, and the arena detonated like a stadium-sized champagne bottle. Flashes popped, legends nodded, and somewhere an algorithm smiled because it knew the graphs were about to turn north. She shook hands like a queen who already knows how to rule, because she'd been governing attention since sophomore year. If the draft was a doorway, Clark didn't walk through. She expanded the hallway until everyone else looked like they were standing still. But the night's glitter was only the prelude to a negotiation storm brewing on the corporate horizon. Execs flew in quiet, private jets and pretended to be casual in very expensive hallways. The whispers weren't subtle. Whoever landed Caitlin wasn't just buying endorsements. They were buying a new address on culture's main street. Brands didn't court her. They competed for survival in a market she suddenly owned. Everyone understood the math. If she could break the rating ceiling, she could break every other ceiling with the same follow-through. Under Armour stepped first, steady and aggressive, sliding a $16 million offer across the metaphorical table. It wasn't just cash. It came with a promise that would have been headline news any other year. A signature shoe, rare as a comet in women's hoops. Adidas arrived with a quieter pitch, $6 million, and a prototype tuned to her pace, banking on design intimacy over brute force. Puma flirted and flinched because the stakes kept rising like a tide you can't outrun on sand. None of it felt small, but none of it felt final. This was a negotiation. It was a prize fight fought with PDFs and whispered leverage. Every brand imagined her logo next to their logo and saw the graphs turn into steep mountain faces. The calculus was simple but unforgiving. Whoever signed Clark wouldn't just win a quarter. They'd reshape a decade. Meetings bled past midnight, and no one pretended to be calm. They performed calmness like a rehearsed monologue at a nervous audition. In the end, one heavyweight walked into the ring, wearing history like a robe. Nike didn't clear its throat. Nike thundered. 3 days after her name echoed through draft night, the swoosh arrived with an offer that emptied the room of oxygen. 8 years on paper, $28 million as the bedrock, and escalators built into the contract like a glass elevator to a $52 million skyline. The number didn't just outbid, it outsignaled, declaring intent the way lightning declares a storm. And then they added the part that changes legends into dynasties, the signature line, designed around what she does that no one else can stop. But numbers only do so much work, without faces to match their weight. So Nike brought the faces that move mountains, and they walked in like gravity had decided to pick sides. Michael Jordan didn't need an introduction, because myth rarely does. Lexie Hull didn't need validation, because momentum already lived in her wake. Together, they sent the message that this wasn't a contract. It was a coalition. Clark thought she was attending a routine brand meeting, the kind that comes with fluorescent lights and careful smiles. Instead, the world tilted under her feet as Jordan offered history and Hull offered the future. And somewhere between them, she found her present. The black box looked ceremonial because it was carrying the kind of weight that makes hands shake and cameras hungry. Inside lay a prototype that didn't feel like fabric and rubber at all. It felt like a chapter opening by itself. Tears arrived, not as weakness, but as the only currency anyone can spend when reality outgrows language. The room witnessed something rarer than records, the exact instant a torch changes hands. The prototype wasn't just a shoe, it was a sentence written in leather about what comes next. Every stitch felt deliberate, every curve matched to a cut she makes at full speed with the world blurring. Jordan didn't say much, because fathers of entire industries don't have to when the evidence stands in the palm of a young star's hand. Bill nodded like someone who knows she's standing in a photograph the future will label turning point. Caitlin lifted the shoe the way a musician lifts a first gold record, careful and certain at the same time. She smiled, and the smile did what highlights do. It replayed across the room until everyone wore a version of it. The applause was immediate, but strangely gentle, as if people were afraid to startle a miracle. She didn't just accept the gift. She accepted the burden that comes with carrying a generation's hope into stores and onto hardwood. History has a heartbeat, and everyone heard it steady and strong. In the reflection on that polished plastic, she could see more than her face. She could see every driveway jumper, every defensive switch, every late-night film session that taught her how to find daylight where there isn't any. She could see little kids who would never again hear, "There isn't a shoe for you," and believe it. She could see the runway extending past the season, past the cycle, past the safe old limits. And in that second, she understood that the price of a dream is accountability to the people who borrow courage from it. If her deal felt unprecedented, it was because precedent had never been asked to keep up with this speed. She wasn't just signing for herself. She was signing for the next wave that would arrive bigger, because the water level had risen. A prototype became a prophecy, and prophecies require performance, not promises. The headlines blazed with a number, but the subtext had better legs. Nike wasn't betting on a moment. Nike was betting on a movement that had already cleared the runway. The comparisons arrived before the ink dried, because all roads in this conversation lead back to 1984. Jordan's first Nike deal invented a new instrument, royalties, that turned sweat into equity and equity into empire. That model made an athlete a business partner and a brand a family name. It taught the world that ownership pays longer than applause and that the right clause can outlast a career. Everyone saw the mirror and waited to see if the reflection matched. Then Sonny Vaccaro spoke, the godfather of modern sneaker lore, and people leaned in. He praised Caitlin like a proud architect marveling at a rising tower, but he didn't hide his disappointment either. No royalties, he said, no true equity clause, at least not yet, and the words hit like a clean block at the rim. If anybody deserves ownership in her legacy, it's her, because she isn't just moving units, she's moving an era. The critique didn't diminish the moment, it framed the next negotiation. The debate spread the way good arguments do, fast, loud, and unexpectedly useful. Was this a ceiling shattered or a window opened just enough to ask for more air next time? People who'd never read a contract in their lives suddenly had opinions on term sheets and revenue shares. Athletes who grew up idolizing Clark's audacity sense a new assignment. Ask the question out loud, then ask it again. Progress rarely arrives perfect. It arrives possible, then gets better under pressure. Caitlin didn't flinch, because the biggest players in any room learn to handle spotlight and microscope at the same time. The absence of royalties didn't erase the presence of everything else. The platform, the power, the prototype that suddenly felt like a promissory note for the next generation. If this was the baseline, the next deals would build wider porches and bigger windows. You don't knock down a wall without leaving sunlight for those who walk through after you. She understood the assignment, win now and negotiate better tomorrow. The conversation hit a nerve because the contrast was impossible to ignore. The $52 million figure made headlines the way fireworks make night feel like noon. The rookie's salary, $76,000, made commentary the way a whisper can still cut through a quiet room. How does the league's brightest star make more in one endorsement than many players make in a decade of lead pay? The question wasn't cheap outrage. It was a ledger issue that finally had everyone looking at the same page. Fans did what fans do when they sense a tide turning. They found their voices and stacked them together. Players did what players must when the game grows faster than the contracts built to contain it. They demanded a better blueprint. Articles multiplied overnight, linking TV rights and ticket demand to money flows that still trickled where they should pour. Politicians in, because politicians smell momentum like sharks smell current. And through it all, Clark played, because the best leverage in the world still looks like a box score that can't be argued with. The league didn't need to be shamed. It needed to be recalibrated, and recalibration begins with a standard. Caitlin's standard was a neon sign blinking at the pace of modern attention, impossible to miss unless you close your eyes on purpose. If she could sell out arenas and eclipse NBA ratings on certain nights, then valuation math had to stop pretending not to understand. The market spoke, and the message was not subtle. Pay what the moment is worth, or the moment will pass you by. What Nike bought wasn't just a face for a campaign. It bought an engine for a long drive up a steep hill. Global campaigns aren't mood boards. They're architecture, and the plans had a position at every intersection of sport and culture. Olympic storylines would run next to lifestyle narratives, with community initiatives braided through like strong thread. The brand didn't see a season. It saw a decade, and decade thinking changes how you spend every quarter. You don't plot a spike, you plot a staircase and climb every step. Clark's presence isn't a vibe. It's a variable that shifts the entire equation. She can walk into a room and turn ambivalence into curiosity in one interview answer. She can walk onto a court and turn curiosity into loyalty in two made threes and a look away dime. This is why Nike aimed big and wide. She doesn't just sell the product. She sells the premise that the product can belong to anyone. Downtown Des Moines and downtown Tokyo don't usually share heroes. She makes the map look smaller. Jordan brought the blueprint, the living proof that one athlete's arc can carry an industry. Lexie brought the movement, the energy of a league that's no longer asking for permission to be the main event. Nike brought the megaphone and the manufacturing muscle to keep the shelves stocked with the moment. Clark brought the reason none of it would work without her edge, poise, and the math that says she never stays quiet for long. When those forces intersect, they don't add, they multiply. Centerpiece is a metaphor. It's a marketing budget line. Her schedule became a calendar anchor, and her content became a content plan all by itself. She would lead the campaign, but she would also expand it, a funnel that keeps catching sunlight no matter where the day begins. If sports is a headline, culture is a paragraph, and commerce is a period that ends a sentence. Nike wrote the sentence and handed Clark the pen to sign it in permanent ink. The shoe isn't a novelty. It's an argument made in foam and laces. It argues that girls deserve tools designed for the way they move, not resized versions of someone else's blueprint. It argues that representation sells not because it flatters the audience, but because it respects the truth. It argues that performance and identity do not compete. They collaborate. Every outsole pattern, every upper material choice, every weight decision says this is built for your foot and your future. Signature status for women has been rare enough to count on one hand, without using all the fingers. That scarcity didn't reflect talent. It reflected caution dressed up like strategy. Clark's line calls a bluff, reminding everyone that the demand was always there. The supply just needed courage. A kid lacing these up doesn't have to borrow a name from the men's game to feel seen. She can write her own name on the driveway in chalk and know the store carries her size. Jordan knows the power of seeing yourself in a shoe that the world wants. It's ownership disguised as comfort, agency hiding in soft tissue and hard rubber. His empire began as a bet that one rookie could move the room, then the city, then the globe. Clark's moment is a sequel no one expected this soon, a continuation, not a copy. If Jordan proved what a man could do, Clark is proving what the market always knew a woman could do when given the same runway. Design follows purpose, and this purpose is larger than any one colorway. The line will flex across performance and lifestyle because Clark exists in both without asking permission. On court, the shoe must survive heat and gravity. Off court, it must survive the algorithm's appetite for newness. That duality isn't a compromise, it's a competitive advantage. The kid in homeroom and the pro in crunch time can wear the same name for different reasons and still feel the same lift. No matter how high the celebration climbs, the work remains a staircase without an elevator. Clark knows this, and it's why the smile fades quickly into focus before every tip. The best way to honor a prototype is to make it look under-designed for what you actually do in it. You elevate until the shoe seems like it's chasing you, not carrying you. That's how products become artifacts. When the player's story outruns the shoe's marketing and pulls it along. Brands measure ROI in quiet rooms. Kids measure meaning in loud ones. The first time a girl sees a shelf filled with a shoe built for her, something in her posture changes. The first time she watches Clark pull up on the logo in the same silhouette, something in her breathing changes. The first time she is told yes by a culture that used to say maybe, something in her future changes. You can't put that on a quarterly report, but you can put it in the world. What happens next is what always happens when a star becomes a standard. Everyone else gets braver, because bravery travels at the speed of example. Equity deals that once felt outlandish start sounding like table stakes in the next negotiation. Royalties that used to live only in men's contracts start sneaking into the red lines of women's. A tide doesn't ask permission to come in. It just arrives and makes the beach look different. Analysts point at the missing royalties and see a battlefield, not a flaw. If this is the baseline, the next move isn't a complaint. It's a demand backed by evidence. The evidence looks like sell-through rates, like waitlist, like posts that won't stop reposting themselves. The evidence looks like ratings curves that rise in the fourth quarter because people refuse to miss what she might do next. You build leverage by winning. You spend leverage by asking for more and refusing to apologize. In boardrooms, a sentence has started appearing that would have made an intern blush 10 years ago. Give her the Jordan treatment. Not because imitation is necessary, but because parity is overdue. Ownership turns endorsement into legacy. Legacy turns moments into monuments. If Clark's line prints money and meaning at the same time, the playbook will update itself in real time. The first mover gets headlines. The fast follower gets market share. The partnership Clark, Jordan, Hull, Nike operates like a four-engine jet each thruster firing in a different lane. Jordan adds myth and infrastructure, a map of the territory, and a warning about the headwinds. Hull anchors a movement's credibility on the hardwood, a signal to players that this is for the league, not just a logo. Nike provides distribution at a planetary scale, the one thing even viral momentum can't hack by itself. Clark provides a spark that keeps lighting every fuse on schedule. Culturally, this feels less like a campaign and more like a correction. The conversation has been waiting for evidence, and now the evidence is wearing a jersey and breaking cameras with every logo 3. Skeptics will always exist, but markets rarely argue with compounding returns of attention. Every sellout crowd becomes a data point, and data points become budget lines, and budget lines become policy. That is how culture changes in capitalism, on paper, then in practice, then in memory. The league benefits because the tide that lifts the boat doesn't check the paint job first. Teammates get bigger platforms, opponents get bigger stages, and everybody gets a raise when the pie refuses to stop expanding. Networks schedule more coverage because coverage keeps winning the time slot. Sponsors show up with bigger checks because the cost of being left out now exceeds the cost of showing up. This is what a flywheel looks like when it finally bites and spins. None of this absolves anyone of responsibility to get the details right. A better CBA matters, because you cannot keep telling the world player is priceless while pricing her at less than a night at courtside in the other league. Better revenue sharing matters, because moments like this prove the money exists. It simply needs new plumbing. Better security and officiating matter, because protecting the product means protecting the people who are the product. If attention is a new oil, then safety is a refinery. Clark's role in all of this remains deceptively simple. Keep being undeniable. Keep stacking box scores until the narrative can't find oxygen anywhere else. Keep turning pressure into art and doubt into a new kind of math. Keep remembering that a shoe is a sentence, and your game is a paragraph that makes it make sense. You don't carry a movement by pushing it. You carry it by walking so far ahead that it follows. The future doesn't arrive in one truckload. It arrives in shipments, each one marked, some assembly required. This deal assembled a lot on day one. A star, a blueprint, a megaphone, and a myth willing to share its microphone. The rest will be built in the months to come, with wins and commercials and community runs that seed a generation. A girl will lace up and find out she can take the shot from a step deeper than yesterday. A league will lace up and find out it can move faster than last year's budget allowed. And still, the image that will outlast the spreadsheets is the simplest one. Jordan standing near the table, quiet and resolute, as if admiring a sunrise he once dreamed might exist. Hull standing beside Clark, not as a prop, but as a partner, a reminder that movements don't rise on individual ladder rungs. Clark holding the prototype like a promise she intends to keep publicly, repeatedly, and with escalating difficulty. The room breathing together, then breaking into applause that felt like the future clapping for itself. From that day forward, a $52 million number hung in the air like a challenge to anyone still asleep. It dared brands to match belief with budget, dared leagues to match rhetoric with reform, dared fans to match enthusiasm with sustained support. It said the quiet part out loud. Women's sports aren't niche, they're underfed. Feed them correctly and watch them grow past the fences you thought were permanent. The field is bigger than the people who built it. Remember, if you pause the story there, it would already count as a win worthy of a banner. But stories like this don't pause, they accelerate, because momentum hates idling. The first drop sells out, the second colorway trends, and by the third the narrative shifts from can she to how high. The league schedules more national windows, and the cameras learn where to aim when impossible things become routine. The sneaker resale market whispers the one word every brand secretly craves: demand. This is the chapter where dreams cease being private property. The driveway kid becomes a morning news segment, and the morning news segment becomes the application for a bigger gym in a town that never had one. College programs recruit in sentences that start with her name and end with possibility. Young pros negotiate with more leverage because the market finally has a comparable that isn't a fairy tale. Brick by brick, the sport builds higher because the foundation keeps refusing to crack. And one day, Sooner than anyone expects, a different athlete will walk into a room that suddenly goes quiet. She'll think it a routine meeting, and it won't be, because history hates reruns but loves sequels. A box will open and a prototype will gleam, and someone will say, "We're ready to do this right," with royalties. In the background, somewhere on a framed wall, there will be a photo of Clark lifting her first pair. She will have turned a bridge into a highway, without waiting for directions. So yes, call it contract, call it campaign, call it coronation printed in leather and stitched in ambition. But don't call it finish line, because finish lines are for races at end. This one doesn't. Not while kids keep lacing, arenas keep filling, and the box score keeps asking for new categories. Clark didn't arrive to replace anyone. She arrived to rewrite the spacing on the page. And the page isn't full yet, not by a long shot. When the credits roll on this era, they will be crowded. There will be brand execs and shoe designers and agents and coaches and opponents and teammates and fans who never missed a tip. There will be politicians who finally fund what they say they love, and administrators who stop being surprised by what sells. There will be media who learn how to cover an event that refuses to be small. There will be kids whose first poster didn't require them to translate their heroes across gender. But at the center of the frame, the camera will hold on a familiar posture. Caitlin, head up, eyes scanning, 5 seconds left on the clock that other people still think matters. She'll rise from 30 feet, as if gravity has agreed, to a brief détente. The ball will arc like a signature on a contract that keeps renewing itself in public. And somewhere, a pair of shoes will squeak the way destiny sounds when it pivots clean and finishes. This is how revolutions look when they wear uniforms and smile for photos. They sign deals that feel too big until the first month of numbers arrives, and proves understatement is the only crime. They inspire arguments that sharpen the next generation's negotiating pen. They turn prototypes into passports and receipts, into rallying cries. They demand better not by shouting, but by selling out. If you're waiting for permission to believe that women's sports can be both righteous and ridiculously profitable, this is your memo. If you're waiting for proof that storytelling and scoring can live in the same body, this is your highlight reel. If you're waiting for the day someone stops calling it women's basketball and starts calling it basketball without a qualifier, this is your practice run. The shoe is real, the deal is signed, and the line is forming around the block. Step into it or get stepped over. And as the season grinds on, another truth emerges that no contract can fake. The work is still the work. Early film, late lifts, middays that leave legs humming. Celebrity can open doors, but only craft can keep them from locking behind you. Clark knows this, which is why her best answer remains the same 5 words. See you at the logo. She turns pressure into tempo and applause into oxygen. So here we are, watching a page turn itself. Jordan's legacy provides the ink, Hull's advocacy provides the margin notes, and Nike's platform provides a press. Clark's game provides a sentence that makes all of it inevitable. This is the business model of belief, scaled to stadium size and backyard hoop size at the same time. Somewhere, someone is measuring this, and somewhere else, someone is just smiling. When people ask years from now, when did it really change, they'll point to a handful of moments. The draft night roar, the scoring record confetti, the prototype lifted beneath lights that understood what they were illuminating, the contract number that skipped a line in every headline, and the first time a little girl laced a shoe with a woman's name on it and felt taller before she stood up. The best part of movement is that it refuses to belong to one person, even when that person is its clearest avatar. Clark didn't ask for ownership of the future. She asked for responsibility to the present. Responsibility looks like minutes and makes like teammates elevated and opponents respected. It looks like community courts refurbished and clinics filled with laughter that sounds like sneakers on tile. It looks like a promise that the next kid won't have to be the first to be the best. And if you're still counting wins, here's one more that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. The industry's imagination has been recalibrated, and imaginations rarely go backward once they've stretched. Executives are already rewriting budgets in pencil that smudges in the direction of more. Creatives are already storyboarding campaigns that center women without apology or asterisks. The culture is already practicing saying "of course" instead of "can we." So yes, keep your spreadsheets and your skepticism if you must. They have their place. and reality loves a good audit. But watch the line outside the store on launch day, the smiles at midcourt on game day, the graphs after quarter 2 of a nationally televised Saturday. Watch the numbers do what belief already did last spring. Watch the future arrive exactly on time. Because in the end, the secret was never a secret. Invest where the attention already lives, and the return will embarrass doubt. Honor the athlete with the tools she deserves, and the culture will honor your brand without being asked. Tell the truth at scale, and the scale will tilt toward you with suspicious ease. Caitlin Clark didn't change what was possible. She exposed what had been waiting. And now the world is dressed for the occasion.